Welcome to this Furthermore Ventures founder conversation. I'm Alaina Sparks, investor and founder of Furthermore, where we back women building companies advancing health across the sectors we interact with every day. At Furthermore, we believe health is shaped not only by healthcare, but by food, materials, products, and systems embedded in daily life. In this discussion, we explore founders building better defaults, designed to shape healthier outcomes over time and contribute to more resilient systems. Categories shift, after all, when healthier models endure. So here we explore not just what founders are building, but how those models become scalable, sustainable businesses that can meaningfully influence how categories and whole systems evolve over time. And today's guest is doing exactly that. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Cate Havstad-Casad, founder of Range Revolution. Range Revolution is a vertically integrated leather goods company rooted in regenerative ranching and American craftsmanship. The company sources hides directly from ranches practicing regenerative grazing, processes them in North America, and designs heirloom quality leather goods intended to last for decades. Much of the leather used in fashion is tied to industrial livestock systems optimized for volume and efficiency, supported by long and often opaque global supply chains. But not all grazing systems are the same. Regenerative ranching practices improve soil health and support carbon sequestration, changing the equation upstream. What if leather didn't reinforce industrial livestock systems and long, opaque global supply chains, but instead supported regenerative land stewardship and more transparent value chains? Range Revolution is working to rebuild parts of that system domestically, reconnecting land, producer, product with the consumer. And Cate's doing it through beautifully designed leather goods. Cate, welcome. I'm so glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Alaina. If anybody knows our story, it's you.
I'm so happy to really have had the chance to meet you several years ago and learn more about what you're building. And again, so happy to have you here today. I know, Cate, you're a designer. First, I think of you that way. Certainly think of you as a big systems thinker as well. But I'm curious to learn more or to share really what your early relationship was with design. And then, of course, how that evolved into building Range Revolution.
Well, I might start all the way back in third grade when I remember getting ready to go into third grade and sketching what my outfits in third grade were going to be. And I remember having, it was just my first kind of memory of, I think, shaping my identity and using style as a way to communicate who I was aspiring to become as a third grader.
Love that.
And so I mean, fast forward, many years later, I started my first business at age 23. It's called Havstad Hat Company. And I had, through some adventures in life, picked up the trade of Western custom hat making. And I began making these hats, and it just caught on like wildfire. It became my full-time job. I started building hats for all kinds of people, country western singers like Casey Musgraves and Margot Price, Jillian Welsh, Shania Twain, Post
Wow.
Malone. I've had like a really just kind of incredible opportunity to have built that business using design and storytelling to really build this global brand. And at the same time, I had met my now husband, who was farming in about 2014 when I was getting my career started in design. And we started farming on just about 3 acres, and he was always farming organically. And I was really enamored with the farm. And it really made me fall in love with local food systems in a way that I hadn't been connected to before that relationship. Today, the farm that we manage is about 1,400 acres of land. We have transitioned over 450 acres of previously conventionally farmed land into organically managed land. And so those two careers of design and storytelling through Havstad Hat Company, and then the growth of our farm business as an organic regenerative farm operation have happened side by side. And both of those journeys ultimately led me to found Range Revolution in 2021. Um, Really, what happened was I wanted to build a product and I wanted to find leathers that aligned with my ethos, how I source my food, how I live the rest of my life.
Mm.
I wanted to find something sustainably sourced from ranchers who I know.
Mm.
And once I opened that door, I realized it didn't exist. I realized that all of our hides from the cattle that we were raising to be meat on the plate were going into the trash. I realized that all the hides for all the ranchers who I know, all of my peers, their hides are all going to the trash. And I just could not believe that is what's happening today. And that's happening across the board for all family size, mid size ranches. And then when I took it one step further and I was like, well, okay, so when I go out to source a hide or leather, where is that coming from? That was when I saw just how opaque the leather supply chain is at a global scale. Most leathers that are on the commodity market today, they might come from places like Brazil, where you have some of the biggest of the packers that really control the industry with very efficient vertical integration dominating the market. So that
Mm.
would be the JBSs of the world, the Tyson, the Cargills. And a lot of those hides are coming from systems of deforestation in other places of the world. So not only do we have approximately 5 million cattle hides every year going into the trash in America, we
Mm.
have regenerative ranches like us losing out on the opportunity to make money on these very valuable parts of the animal that are part of a waste stream currently. But you have the proliferation of, deforestation in other parts of the globe that are really supplying the commodity supply chain. So for all those reasons, plus like a dash of youthful ignorance, I really thought that I was the one to be able to solve this with the right design mindset.
I love it. I think you're the one too. So many thoughts come to mind as you're as you're describing that origin story. Frustration and even a little bit of anger, right, about the system, the incumbent system that persists. I also think about jokingly, Cate, like I wish I had you in third grade designing, styling my outfits. That's amazing. I love how you think. I have like just a quick clarifying question. Um, so these these steer are going to production to be processed for meat, for food, and is it the case that in all regional systems, or is it regenerative systems exclusively, that the hides are always ending up in the waste stream?
It would be any mid-size operation, whether they're conventional or organic or regenerative. It really has to do with size, scale. So if we were a ranch that was feeding into one of the big four packers that really control the industry and have that level of vertical integration, the hides would make it into the supply chain because those big companies know that this is the ratio. So in a big system like that, they're going to make use of every part of the animal. They have, offtake for the hides, the bones, the fat, the organs, everything, because like that's what makes money. In the mid-sized systems, 35% of every carcass is going to waste. So the rancher is only getting 65% return on every asset he sends to be
Mm.
meat on the plate. And that is a part of what is leading to the very difficult economic realities for family sized ranches, or I would say, regional processing, more decentralized food systems. That's it's just that consolidation versus having let go of the effort to aggregate pieces from this middle of agriculture agriculture of the middle is often this term used to talk about the more regenerative systems.
Okay.
And that is the system where you really see the most amount of waste. And this is my position, having worked in food systems for the past 13 years and a total advocate for regenerative agriculture, a practitioner of regenerative agriculture. We have taken lands here. We live in an arid high desert region. We have used the strategic grazing of cattle to take land that was on its way to desertification and reverse that process and bring biodiversity back, and to bring, water holding capacity back, increasing soil organic matter, using the strategic grazing of cattle. So I have firsthand seen like what strategic holistic management of cattle can do for the land in a regenerative manner. But I've also seen in the belly of the beast of what it means to have 35% of every cattle going to be meat going to a waste stream. And it is what is crushing mid-sized family ranching.
Unbelievable. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, the expansion on that. I've kind of made you jump right to the problem here, just with that clarification. And so let me take a little bit of a step back, because I want to be sure that people understand, what does regenerative agriculture mean? You touched on it a little bit, but if you can give us like a 2-sentence like primer on what do we mean by regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, regenerative agriculture, from my perspective, is a system of management that leads to improved economic and ecological realities on the landscapes. I add economic because there is no ecological resiliency without economic resiliency. And so everybody's context is different, right? Agriculture and regenerative outcomes are so tied to the context of a region, meaning climate. So if we were in Georgia, the way that we would manage our landscape for regenerative outcomes is completely different because of the level of precipitation they have in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
In a place like where we live, we get on average 11 inches of precipitation per year. It's extremely arid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a high desert environment. It is a rangeland environment. And I forget what the number is. It's somewhere close to 60% of Earth's landmass is rangelands. These are very specific types of ecosystems with very specific types of grasses, trees, and shrubs, and ruminants that have all co-evolved together over millennia. And for a long time, these rangelands were inhabited by the buffalo. And there was a natural way in which these ruminants moved across the landscape based on predator pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And the types of grasses that are natural here, they co-evolved with the presence of those ruminants. And so to actually remove ruminants grazing from those landscapes often leads to a degrading of that landscape. And that is what we're seeing happen across the West with development and fencing and kind of the reduction of a more active human role in its management. We're seeing desertification spread. And that means, less grasses, less biodiversity. It actually means that when it rains, it's harder for the soil to actually hold that water. There's so many things, but so regenerative agriculture, it's about understanding the context of a place and how our management and our mindsets lead to the ecological and the economic improvement of the whole.
Love it. I love how you describe this, because I do think of it as one way of farming often, and it's not, right? It's a great point. It depends where you are, and what that climate is like. Thank you for clarifying.
For some people don't know the word cover crop, right?
Right.
We use cover crops here, you bet. And other, places like, the word organic is understood, but in our context, we were farming organic for a very long time and growing primarily vegetables for a long time. But we lost a lot of our irrigation waters over the past 5-6 years. And when that has happened, which is happening in a lot of places, you really start to understand really what a place like this really evolved to be. And it really evolved to be a rangeland ecosystem where it would have seen more perennial grasses and more
Mhm.
grazing. So actually, we had to consider that like organic vegetable production without enough irrigation waters was degenerative to the landscape.
Mm.
It
Wow.
actually was the right regenerative decision for us to transition to more of a holistic grazing model if we wanted to actually improve the ecological state of the lands we manage. So in the conversation of,
Yeah.
animal agriculture versus plant agriculture, we've done it all. And it is so context based.
Wow. Yeah. I again, like I'm as someone who's not a farmer, but someone who cares deeply about the planet and the food I eat. I even hadn't thought about, right? Like those kinds of decisions that farmers need to make. Like, is this better for the
Yeah.
land, for the ecosystem to grow plants, to grow vegetables, or to graze?
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for,
It's an increasing question of our generation,
yeah.
as water scarcity continues, especially across the West. What is contextually right for an ecosystem is a big question. But I'll add, and this will probably segue us into talking about like why textiles. Through all of this, I've been getting my master's in business through building businesses, through Havstad Hat
Yes.
Company, through building Casad family farms, from scaling from 3 acres to 1,400 acres as first generation farmer ranchers. And having worked in the food system for over 12 years, like I understand what the margins of the food business are, and they are slim, slim, slim.
Very slim.
Now, as I started to get curious about leather and obviously my work in Havstad Hat Co, and I started to kind of dream up what this first product was going to be for range, I started to understand what the margin opportunity was in fashion, in finished products, in D2C creation of leather goods. And I just saw this massive opportunity that the food system doesn't provide. It provides an opportunity, it provides a margin in a business model that can actually be this economic engine to reinvest back into the ranchers. So, all of us who want to design for a more beautiful world, like it has to make sense. And so it was the driver for me to really put my focus into building Range Revolution. The waste dilemma of the industry is glaring. The impacts of having an opaque globalized supply chain that lead to deforestation is glaring. And then third, like my heart is really in wanting to create economic outcomes that improve the lives of regenerative ranchers that I know, who are some of the greatest land stewards you'll ever meet. And Range Revolution, leathers and finished products in this category provide a margin that like just the food system just cannot compete with. And that is ultimately why I have poured my heart and soul into building Range Revolution for the past 4 years.
Love it. Okay. You've definitely touched on, the problem, which I think many of us just don't even think about. And also the opportunity. I want to pull on that just like a little bit, and still talking about this really massive problem that you're taking on. And that is just it can be super quick, but like why does this traditional model persist? Right? The incumbent model, if you will.
I mean, for a long time, I think it's just because, the economies of scale of the big packers who are processing thousands of head of cattle a day, it leads to a very, very, you know, large aggregation opportunity at one site. When we do this work where we're aggregating from mid-sized systems, we're aggregating smaller quantities, say a processor that might be doing, 150 to 300 head of cattle a month versus 50,000 head of cattle a month.
Mm.
So the big, big system, it works for ultimate efficiency. And that's really what most of our food system has evolved to really work for is ultimate efficiency. But I think our generation is seeing that efficiency does not equal resiliency, and efficiency doesn't equal healthy outcomes. So that is really just like everything else in agriculture, we have just seen a massive amount of consolidation. And that's really where the big system wins.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in the big system, Cate, where are the ranchers positioned?
They're not even on the totem pole. So, what I mean by that is the rancher is actually currently paying to dispose of their hides. So, and then in the big system, say you're a rancher who sells into the Tyson or the Cargill, you certainly are not being compensated for the hides. um, in our system, even a sort of mid-sized commodity grower or a regenerative rancher, the way that things have been working for the past couple of decades, when they send that steer to slaughter to be meat on the plate, the disposal fee of sending that hide to the landfill is passed on from the processor to the rancher. So again, not only are they losing out on the economic opportunity of that hide, they're actually paying to dispose of it.
Paying for it.
So that's the way things have been. We do not do things that way. We make sure that the processor is paid for their work, the rancher is compensated for their hide as well. And so not only do we remove an expense that is a part of the P&L, we're adding a new revenue stream to the P&L.
Love it. It's so important and seemingly like so obvious, right? If you can figure out a pathway for these ranchers to be compensated, right? Which obviously you have done. So yeah,
And
well,
what we haven't touched on, Alaina, and I'll just say it briefly, which is like we've identified problem within the cattle industry, but let's just identify the big problem of the fashion industry in general. Decades ago, before the 50s, 80 to 90% of our fashion supply chain was made up of natural fibers. And these are things that came from the land: cotton, linen, hemp, leather, wool, robust
yeah,
industries for all of these things. Um, since about the 1960s, the proliferation of polysynthetic fibers in our fiber shed has expanded at a rapid rate. Today, almost 70% of the textiles that make up the fashion industry are petroleum based. And more, even, not, put sustainability of the earth as aside,
yeah,
like at this point we're starting to understand like what it means to have plastic cloaking our bodies, to have plastic in our
toxicity.
homes, to have plastic in our food systems. It's really making us sick.
Yeah,
And the fashion industry is one arena where I think plastics have been so insidiously woven into our lives because it is disguised as a very cheap textile.
yeah, durable. Yeah, yeah. And certainly very cheap. Thank you so much, Cate, for mentioning that because it's such an integral part, right, of the issue that you're looking to solve. It's interesting because your work cuts across so many different domains. And yes, it's food. Yes, it's fiber. Yes, I think of leather as a different fiber, but you're dealing with all of these different I guess forms, right? And the problem is massive. And what you're doing cuts across all of these systems that are beyond ripe for true disruption. And yeah, I can't wait to talk to you more about, basically like, is this viable? And we're going to get there because we're all cheering for you, Cate. this needs to happen for sure. So let's kind of dissect the model a little bit more. That is your business, right? And talk about a little bit more about what you, unlike the others, unlike incumbents, right, in industry, are optimizing for. They might be optimizing for speed, for efficiency. We've mentioned that a number of times, right? Especially in the food industry. Let's just produce more and more food. Forget about the nutrient density. Forget about how it gets to our people. and it's optimized for profit, for cost compression, all those things. What are you optimizing for?
We're really optimizing for more regenerative outcomes, both, on the land, within our supplier relationships, and for the entire ecosystem of, you know, food, fiber, supply chain partners, and the consumer. But what's interesting about like building this model for the start for where we have been so far. So say, for example, last year, we aggregated all of our hides. We aggregated a full truckload of hides exclusively out of 3 California ranches. I'll just go ahead and name what they are because some people might be familiar. Richard's Regenerative, Eel River Organics, and Stemple Creek. By building these direct relationships, by aggregating regionally, and by transporting those hides, keeping everything in North America, what we have actually found is that the landed cost per square foot of our leathers is outcompeting globally imported leathers of same grade. So while we are optimizing for more, regionalized sourcing, traceable sourcing, regeneratively sourced hides, we have actually found that this model of sourcing is optimizing for economics as well.
Amazing. And that's what we need. Thank you. I mean, from the start, I'm sure you knew that this is what you had to optimize for, right? For this to be scalable and grow. Yes, it has to be what I would think of as viable. As you were thinking about the business, Cate, what were the trade-offs that you were unwilling to make?
Let's see. I'm never willing to like not pay the rancher or to follow the like when the commodity price of hides dips, the price that we pay the rancher will not dip to that commodity level. We maintain a consistent payment to the rancher because we've built that into our cost of goods. We can pay them well. That's something that happens so much in the commodity system that whether it be the farmer, the rancher, or like the suppliers, they get so squeezed. Like if there's an opportunity to squeeze one more margin out of our suppliers, often the system does that. But in a funny way, I think that ends up leading to cannibalization of the people that we need the most. So that's one of my non-negotiables. We will always pay our ranchers, the same rate that we have negotiated, no matter what is happening in the commodity market. I'll stick with that.
Yeah, I love it. Amazing. Okay, let's talk about and we've touched on all of this, but I just want to drill in a little bit to each because when I think about innovation, right, I can't help but think about the 3 lenses of desirability, feasibility, and viability. Because truly, if these healthier models are going to shape outcomes over time, they need to work clearly in the real world, commercially, operationally, culturally. So let's just explore let's explore, I guess, range revolution through those lenses. What we haven't talked a lot about is desirability. And, Cate, often it's like I think about my work in innovation, so many times this is what companies like consider less, right? Like there's an idea and companies move right on to viability, right? And well, feasibility first and really viability without really thinking through like what's the demand, right? Like what is the desirability for this particular product? And I know that you have it, but I want to talk about it. So if you could just spend a little bit of time with like who is your core customer? But most importantly, like what signals tell you that consumers are ready for regenerative leather?
Yeah. So in the direct to consumer realm, I think of our company because we have 3 main channels. We build finished product and we sell finished product direct to consumer. We also sell our finished product wholesale to independent boutiques and other retailers. And then we have the B2B supply chain solution partner side, where we're actually selling our finished leather to other, whether it be fashion designers, or I can get into some of the other channels we're expanding into, like furniture and auto. But
Amazing.
with these three different channels, one of my friends helped me think about it. They each kind of have their own personality. The Range Revolution direct to consumer business, like all kind of early adopters, I think some of our first super fans were people who they want a beautiful leather product that they can just feel good about. You know, not everybody, cares even about the words regenerative. They might just care that this is sourced from an American rancher and
Mhm.
that sort of domestic supply chain matter to them. That's one of our core customer profiles. We also
Love
have
it.
the avid regenerative advocate, which is like a smaller but growing section. People who have seen Biggest Little Farm, Kiss the Ground. They understand a bit about what regenerative grazing is. When they learn that we actually source these leathers from regenerative systems, anyone who's concerned about their impact in the world, that's another category of super fans for
Yeah.
us. And then, I would say this other category, like I was saying earlier, like we can't just rest on altruism. Range Revolution is not like a crunchy hippie brands, right? Like kind of sustainable fashion has been for too long pigeonholed in this sort of like neutrals, hempy
Yes.
vibes.
Hemp.
That's not
Hemp. Yes.
us. I was
Yep.
really adamant about building our product and our collection line to be timeless heritage, but also trend forward. So last year, we developed about 7 new colorways, really speaking to future trend forecast, such as deep pine greens, really rich burgundies. We have a new honey color coming, and we expanded from just doing kind of a classic veg tan tumbled leather to doing more fashion forward suedes, chocolate suede, which is really in right now. So this could just be the fashion girly who like loves and wants a chocolate suede satchel.
Yeah.
This could be the person who loves a domestic American sourced product and that matters to them. And this could be for that very special group of people who are really advocates for regenerative agriculture. And then in the B2B realm, this is where we have some of our actually strongest signals. We executed on our first contract for a fashion brand founded by a very renowned designer. Her name is Jack Cameron, and she led denim at Calvin Klein during their real
Amazing.
peak. And she started a brand called Rua, and she's really one of New York's like most I don't know how to put it, but she's being written about in Vogue, and she just
Mhm.
launched her fall collection with Mode Operandi, and she is just like impeccably designed collections. And Jack is, very quietly and very intentionally investing in regenerative cotton supply chains. She has come on and partnered with Range Revolution for leather sourcing.
Mm.
Um, another company that I would signal who is also really investing in its supply chains would be Citizens of Humanity. They have made very direct and intentional investments into their regenerative organic cotton supply chains.
Mhm.
Other brands that I might reference that are kind of in the same way, really investing in the supply chain at this level would be the sneaker brand Veja. Beja has been investing in their cotton farmers and in securing their supply chains for well over, I think they've been going for 20 years.
Yes.
Um, Loro Piana would be another example of a really premium luxury brand that is really leaning into provenance, traceability, and very high quality through that closeness in the supply chain.
Mhm.
So on the B2B realm, like those are the signals and those are the emerging areas that like we are really excited to not just be a vendor to, but to be a supply chain solution partner for them. And I say that because for any brand who might be selling into the EU, which for most of the luxury fashion brands is a major market, there's legislation that was passed a couple of years ago, but is now just being implemented. The EU's Deforestation Regulation Act.
Yeah.
It actually requires brands that have certain products in their supply chain, such as leather or coffee, places that historically have had problems with deforestation. There's now mandates around traceability of these products. And we're very advantageously positioned with a very traceable supply chain from the ranch all the way through finished part or finished leather. And so for the fashion brands who are preparing to have traceability within their leather supply chain, the big commodity systems, it is much more difficult and they are struggling to really get systems of traceability in place. And that is why Range Revolution is really positioned as the supply chain solution partner for brands that want to provide provenance and traceability
Mhm.
into their product line.
Wow. Um, all I can think about is like, who doesn't want this, right? Like what, and I hesitate to say B2B, player, but partner, right? Not vendor, partner of yours or potential partner who wouldn't want this, right? As a consumer, like I tick all the personas that you were talking about, right? I definitely, 25 years ago was the one wearing, the only color hemp t-shirt or whatever you could get, and the only cotton business appropriate suit you could wear, in New York City. And yeah, I mean, it was tough because the color palette was very muted. And I'm so excited by, what is possible today. I'm sitting here actually with a couple of your items, a couple of your products that I wear all the time, including, the crossbody and the wristlet. But yes, I enjoy so many of your bags. I'm also like, the proud owner of, I don't know, probably 20 pairs of Veja shoes, right? So I just, I think obviously, there is significant demand. What I do want to talk about is what you've been able to prove out from a demand perspective. So, um, tell me about revenue. Tell me, if whatever you're willing to share, right? Tell me about uh, what you've been able to capture,
Yeah.
and also just take us back to like because I'm forgetting when you launched, right? Was it 3 years ago? So over the past 3 years or so,
Yeah.
let's talk about some numbers that you're willing to share.
Yeah. So over the past 2 years, since we have really had an e-commerce website, we've done about $500,000 in direct-to-consumer sales. And we launched our first or executed our first wholesale deals just at the end of last year. So that's a new category that's growing quickly for us this year with a couple of really exciting brands in the pipeline that I should be able to talk about very soon. And they look like
Great.
high volume, long-term committed partnerships. So that's very exciting. Um, what I'll say about proving viability in the beginning, because this supply chain did not exist when we started. Things were inefficient. And so we were moving pellets around at a time. And it was, things were moving kind of ping ponging. We were getting them from any kind of regenerative ranches that we could at that time. And so pellets might move from Georgia, Minneapolis, California, to then make their way down to Leon, Mexico, or to one of our manufacturing partners in Los Angeles. And those inefficiencies, led to a higher landed cost.
Yeah.
This last year, we were able to scale to move a full truckload, and we really focused that aggregation in, just like in California to start with. That full truckload from, taking this off the spreadsheets and into real life, from aggregation, transport through the finishing. That's really where we got to prove that this is ready for mass market adoption. So just to throw out some numbers, landed cost economics.
Mm.
So average landed cost per square foot for a chrome tanned leather from Range Revolution would be somewhere in the range of 650 to 675 a square foot. From for like a luxury high grade, number one finished leather.
Okay.
that leather of same grade from Italy or Germany, which is, two key places where luxury leathers are sourced from, might come in at closer to $14 to $17 a
Wow.
square foot. So, and this is really like apples to apples luxury grades. So it really took, one, getting to scale to get to that full truckload and moving out
Right.
of the kind of inefficiencies of the earlier years. So I like to think we're through sort of the first early valley of death where we really had to do whatever it would take to aggregate and get these hides to the tannery and to a manufacturing partner. And we have learned a lot along the way. Anybody who has been in manufacturing understands, things are always going to come up. You're going to have to negotiate with your manufacturers. You're going to have to build in a longer lead time than you actually think. We've really gone through all of those early learning lessons and those
Yeah.
early inefficiencies to then get to this point of moving truckloads at a time.
Amazing. So to me, um, the feasibility is there, right? You started moving pallets at a time. And Cate, you were moving those to Mexico and to LA. Tell us about like how your supply chain, I guess, what your supply chain looks like in terms of, travel. And then I have a follow-up because I'm kind of surprised about the landed cost differential. And so I'd love for you to speak also about like why is that differential so great?
Yeah. So let's see. In the beginning, do you want me to talk about my supply chain today or as it started?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
especially as it relates to like, things you've learned along the way, bottlenecks you faced. Yeah, let's hear it.
In the beginning, I had certain kind of, I think, idealistic views of only doing things in the United States. And what I learned quickly, one of the biggest bottlenecks is that we have lost a lot of our tannery capacities here in America. So there's not that many tanneries left. A lot of them, most of them, are on the East Coast. So
Hmm.
in the beginning, if we were aggregating from some of these ranches in California, we were also pulling from some regenerative ranches in Minnesota. They were going in the beginning to a small family tannery in Wisconsin.
Huh.
And they were just, lovely, small batch, very limited in, the colors and the finishes that they could offer. And as, we started to look for our manufacturing partners, Leon, Mexico is really the heart of leather craftsmanship in Mexico. Most of the great leather goods, let's see, leather boots, Leon is really Mecca for that.
Mm.
So we found one of our manufacturing partners there in Leon, Mexico. We also have a manufacturing partner in Los Angeles. Same thing. There's not a lot of manufacturing capacity left in LA. But for those that are there, we would love to support that manufacturing industry. So it was always my vision to move from this, patchwork of aggregation to really consolidate to the West Coast because the consolidation of opportunity or the amount of opportunity that exists here in the intercontinental West is large. This is not like a small volume. This
Mm.
is about, I'd say, the opportunity is about $54 million a year in leather sales just between 5 Western states.
Oh, wow.
So, cattle production here in the West is large. Of who we have identified as practicing regeneratively, we approximate about 200,000 cattle per year coming out of more regenerative systems, and then hopefully with time the opportunity to pull more ranchers into a more regenerative model by providing them this incentive and opportunity to enter new markets. But again, just between 5 Western states, there is enough hide volume to be doing around $54 million a year in leather sales. So
Just to confirm, Cate, that's regenerative hide volume.
yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
So
Um,
that is really what, like, just that has been pushing me to focus on this West Coast aggregation opportunity. Um, and through my modeling, I know when we need to start looking outside of, just those 5 Western states. about the square footage and about how many customers and how much in D2C sales it would take to kind of outgrow this West Coast aggregation. And I can't tell you, it's, weekly we're contacted by somebody who would like us to take their hides. So again, it's the number that I know is about 5 million across the United States are currently going to the waste. Not all of those are regenerative, but of that, a large portion are. So the opportunity to expand aggregation beyond just the West Coast, we'll take that as the demand, tells us we need to.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. Wow. I I'm surprised by that number, right? And also, like, I'm just curious, how many more ranches, right? Like, is there currently like an unlimited number of, you know what I mean, of regenerative ranchers? Um, of course, you've got to look at the demand side, which I appreciate you saying, but I mean, you're not going to run out of supply.
It doesn't look like we'd run out of supply anytime soon. And, I would love if our work led to, a pipeline of bringing more ranchers into
Absolutely.
curiosity of like, wow, they're actually building value-added markets for the hides. Wouldn't that be nice? And
Yeah.
so I think of this like, and investors who I'm in relationship with, they're thinking like an ecosystem. Like, what is
Right.
an ecosystem style approach to investment in regenerative food systems? Because if we want to see more regenerative meat companies doing well, we have to then co-invest with these other, companies that are building the value-added markets for that other 35% of the carcass
Yes.
that's not the stake in the grind.
Yes.
So that's really what we're here to do. We've picked our lane. It happens to be one with great profit margins, and
Yeah.
we're really we have a fashion industry that is hungry for real leather. I love style. I love beautiful crafted goods. Like, I'm a snob about my denim. Like, I am a snob about like the perfect white tee. Um, I really want beautiful things. Um, but I think it was
I won't
David
ask you what
Graeber.
you're wearing. I won't ask you what you're wearing, but of course, after this, I'm going to.
I'm wearing all Rua. I will proudly tell you because I love
Okay.
Rua. So
Amazing.
regenerative cotton, right? Made in the United States, New
Fabulous.
York-based designer, regenerative cotton. Um, but David Graeber has this great quote, and whenever I paraphrase it, I sort of butcher it, but it's this great, truth about the world is that it is what we design it to be, and so it can just as easily be designed differently.
Yeah.
So if we all collectively are super happy with how things have been going, then let's keep doing what we've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that there's such a massive opportunity to let design be a force for good. And I'm not alone in this, right? Like, there are these signals from other prominent designers, whether it's Jack Cameron at Rua, or it's
Mhm.
Citizens of Humanity, or it's Veja, or it's Laura Piana. Like, we can just as easily design for different outcomes.
Yeah.
Um, we're not beholden to like the way that it has been, and we don't have to rest on altruism for these sorts of natural fiber supply chains to be the status quo in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Once upon a time, American agriculture and American manufacturing was very strong. And I don't think that it's crazy to think that it could be again.
Yeah. I'm so excited for that. I'm so excited that, there are people like you who are working on this problem. And you're right. Um, it doesn't have to be, an altruistic, consumer, right? This is a consumer who just really wants to enjoy a beautifully made product. And what it supports might not be the first thing that consumers are thinking. But they'll be drawn, right? They'll be drawn to this beautiful craft, which is fantastic. Um, so Kate, we've talked about the desirability. We've talked about the fact that you've proven this out, right? And we know it can scale. Um, and we've talked about, I want to go back to the landed cost thing a little bit, but you have very healthy margins. Like you've mentioned this numerous times. Um, and I want to talk about that from, you know, also from a viability perspective. And, at what point, like, you will have proven that this is a scalable, sustainable, you know, um, self-sustaining, right? Company where you have gone way beyond and taking care of many stakeholders that so many traditional companies, you know, aren't designing for.
So, yeah, from a forecast perspective, we're projected to reach profitability by the end of 2027, early 2028. We have been very financially conservative in our growth so far. We have very healthy margins, like you said. In our finished products line, margins land somewhere between 78 to 82%, just on a product margin.
Coming
Um,
from food, Kate, like coming from my food hat, right? And like, what kind of
I
margin?
know. I know it really is. Yeah. So, just like having one product margins that healthy, like do not exist in the food system. I'm very intimately aware with that as
Yes.
well. Um, and like what signals that this has reached mass market, adoption. Um, you know, look, we have a few contracts right now that are like in the pipeline with really exciting major brands. Um, Honestly, in my view as the founder, like just one of these partnerships, like inking that deal this year, like that to me proves mass market viability. Um,
Amazing.
yeah.
Love it. Thank you for that. I want to go back to the differential in landed cost um, between leather from, I think you mentioned Italy and Germany as an example, and what you're able to see. Why? What is is it because of, shipping around the world for processing? What is that like one of the major drivers of
Yeah.
cost?
Yeah, in the models that we modeled out this year, it definitely took tariffs into consideration,
Of course.
shipping costs into consideration. Freight is only getting more and more expensive.
Yeah.
And then like in my eyes, understanding the volume of cattle production in the United States versus the volume of cattle production in Europe is completely different. We produce a lot more cattle here in the United States. So I actually think a hide is a much more valuable commodity in Europe just based on volume of availability. And then
Why?
if that hide, say, originated in Brazil, it's also going to travel around the globe. And I had done this modeling in the beginning. The average commodity hide might travel 20 to 25,000 miles around the globe before it is a finished product in somebody's hand. And Range Revolution's leathers will travel on average 2,000 miles before it is a finished product in that person's hand.
Such a huge difference. Yeah.
That difference, both from, like a carbon footprint, but also, yeah, in the cost to ship these things around the globe is significant.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Sorry to keep pressing on keep pressing on it. I think we've covered at least as within the time that we have, right? Enough about how this business is proven out, whether or not it can be self-efficient, um, and whether the desirability is there for sure. We know it is. So what does long-term success look like for Range Revolution?
Long-term success looks like continuing to use this, very profitable engine and opportunity to build not only, great economic returns for our investors, for our supply chain partners, but absolutely for the ranchers who are intrinsic to the supply chain. Long-term success looks like partnerships with other fashion brands, expanding into furniture designers, expanding into the automobile industry, where provenance, traceability, are not just a nice value add, but are increasingly going to be mandated. Um, and in those partnerships, really creating partnerships that are regenerative by nature. And what I mean is long-term commitments, and building those partnerships where we're not just a vendor, we're a supply chain solution. And, you know, for me, long-term success for Range Revolution personally is, seeing an opportunity for an acquisition event that is aligned, whether it be with a strategic partner who, really like we have built long-term supply chain resiliency for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have my eye on, a few sort of platform companies who tend to look at brands like this, who build value in the supply chain. And it's about building an entire business model, capital structure, and partnerships that are designing with the end in mind,
Mm-hmm.
which by that I mean a more beautiful world, one that is more environmentally and economically resilient for everybody along the supply chain. Um, that would be long-term success.
So admirable. I love what you're doing, Kate. Um, just amazing. And it's so um, you know, it's warms my heart. There's no other way to say it, to hear you talk like this and to see the success that you've had. And truly to know that really, I mean, I feel like there's nothing stopping you, right? Like that, I feel like we're culturally moving in this way. You can just seize on this opportunity. So thank you for taking it. I do have one, final question that I like to ask founders, which is, as you think about, consumers that are navigating your space, what's one thing you would want them to pause and consider before making a purchasing decision?
I think the first thing would be, is this a natural fiber? You know, I think just questioning what are the things we bring into our daily life, and, you know, does it come from the earth? Is it a plastic derivative? Is just a big question for our generation right now. And particularly, like, we're aware of this, I think, more and more in our food products, but I think it's time we really ask this question: is this a natural fiber or is this petroleum, when it comes to the textiles that we put on our bodies or put in our homes? So start there. That would also be, a point of success for me if I'm a part of this sort of like awakening and rebuilding our capacities for natural fibers. Um, and then I would love, if people got curious about, like, okay, if it is a natural fiber, like, where did it come from? Just like we ask,
Yeah.
or some of us ask, like, where did that steak come from? Um, that that would be just like a wonderful step in the right direction. And I think really just building on the successes of the farm to table movement in food, to take that approach to textiles and
Mm,
fashion, it's inevitable. I do think, as we have a health awakening and really an understanding of like what it does to our bodies, our homes, and our waterways to let petroleum derivatives fill our closets, it's going to be more and more a focus of the fashion industry. Plus, natural fibers are beautiful. Like when
they
you
are
grab
beautiful.
a very finely woven merino wool sweater, a really, really high quality leather bag, a beautiful tweed cap. Like these are things that the integrity of the fiber really does speak for itself.
I love it. Yeah. So is it a natural fiber and where did it come from? And you're absolutely right. As I actually even wrote that down, like those are the things I think about when I choose my food, right? Those are exactly the questions. Like, is this natural? Is this real food? Right? So is this real fiber?
Mhm.
And did it come from, the rancher down the street, or the farmer down the street in my region, or did it come from, halfway across the world?
Yeah.
So I love it. Thank you for that framing. As I reflect on this conversation, Cate, what stands out to me is, I've said this, but is your intentionality, behind what you design, what you build. The dominant leather model, optimized for scale and cost efficiency, but was totally disconnected, is totally disconnected from land, producer, product, and certainly the consumer. Um, what Range Revolution is attempting is much more integrated, more transparent, and aligned fully to long-term positive outcomes for all stakeholders. It's an effort to reconnect value to the land and the people stewarding it while demonstrating that regeneration and your design excellence can coexist with a scalable, sustainable business. And when models like that sustain themselves and grow, they don't just compete within a category, they influence how the category evolves. And honestly, like that's what I can't wait to see. You're such a pioneer in this space. And I think, through what you prove out, there will be more and more activity like this, right? It's activation of this category. Thank you again so much for building with that level of discipline and vision. And thank you all for listening to this conversation. If this conversation resonated, share it with someone who cares about how products shape our health, the health of our planet, and the resiliency of our communities. You can learn more about Cate and Range Revolution online and follow both Range Revolution and Furthermore Ventures on Instagram and LinkedIn for more insights and upcoming conversations. We'll continue these conversations with founders building better defaults and shaping healthier outcomes over time. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks,
Thank
Cate.
you, Alaina.